So welcome everybody. As always thrilled to have so many people who want to join, willing and able. So really appreciate your time, and just a reminder really that this group is for everybody within the group. So so always give us any of your ideas and comments as to how you think the sessions go or what you want to see from them in the future. And I know that Anthea is brilliant at sending out those messages to say, you know, let us know what you want from your group. Just a bit of housekeeping then. If you don't mind turning your microphones off unless you're talking or you want to ask a question or share a thought, you do get a bit of echo back sometimes on Google, and it's just easier if the other microphones are off unless you're talking. There's for those of you not particularly familiar, if there is anyone with Google, there is a little hand at the bottom of the screen if you want to join in, if you want to ask a question or share anything with us, then please just stick your hand up, and I think these days in Google it gives you a lovely queue, so it says who was first and second and third, so that's a new feature which is handy. Jen's going to introduce Sam shortly, so I'm not going to steal that thunder, and so Sam, please don't think I'm being rude by mentioning you but not explaining you. But later in the session, if you have any questions at all for Sam, then please drop them in the chat. Again, for those of you not particularly familiar with Google, there's a little square with in the bottom right, or at least it is on my screen, so press that and then you can add your comment or your question in there. Anthea's already explained it will be recorded and shared out with those that are members of the group if they ask for it, but the breakout groups will be edited out, so so please don't feel unable to discuss or share anything that you want to in there. Okay. So just brief agenda then. I think we've already said our welcomes. I'm Maxine Cornelius, for those of you that haven't met me before. I absolutely love being part of Elevate and are really pleased with what it's growing into. I co-chair the group with Jen Cassidy, who will introduce herself no doubt in a minute, and Anthea, who actually does all the hard work in gathering us all together and putting the slide deck together, and et cetera, et cetera. So the three of us are quite passionate about this network and driving things forward, and we're always delighted that like-minded people come together. Our guest speaker, Sam Grierson, will be introduced by Jen, and we're delighted, absolutely delighted that Sam's joining us today, and I'll let Jen tell you a little bit more about her in a minute. We're then going to get into some Q&A after Sam's session, so so feel free, add your comments or your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. We're then going to get into a bit of a workshop on intersectionality, which will form two different parts of the workshop. One is a little bit of actually time for you to kind of to think about yourselves and set yourselves up and really think about yourselves in this way. And then the second is a little bit more interactive in the breakout groups, but we'll explain that a little bit better and a little bit more when we get to it. And then at the end, we'll hopefully get together for a few key reflections and give ourselves some actions as to what do we want to take forward personally from what we've heard today. So I hope that's okay with everybody. Probably worth framing then what intersectionality, if I can even say it properly, well, I think I did, what does it even mean? And look, it's a really, really important subject, I think, and one that's really interesting for us in this group today. Ultimately, intersectionality is a framework that examines how different aspects of our identity, our race, our gender, our sexuality, our disability, our class, and how they overlap and compound either discrimination or privilege or both. And so that's really the focus of today and what we're going to talk about. And I'm sure everybody on this call has got some really kind of interesting thoughts, comments, and can share what that means to each of us. I think there's some key facts that are probably quite important to touch on, and I'm going to do a bit of screen reading, but I kind of don't apologise for it because I think it really is important to understand why it's important. So women with intersecting identities such as, and we've already talked about them a little bit, such as race, disability, neurodivergence, sexuality, class background, religion, often face compounded challenges in the workplace, especially when you're talking about industries such as all of ours, which are very male-dominated sectors. And so actually it's an important point to raise and debate and talk about. Black women in the UK are over 3 times more likely than white women to be unemployed, even with the same qualifications, which is quite astounding, isn't it? With the same qualifications, that remains true today. In construction, ethnic minority women face higher rates of isolation and report more difficulty accessing mentorship and leadership roles. Again, a real challenge. Why? Interestingly, among autistic adults in the UK, just 29% are in any kind of employment, and autistic women report much higher rates of workplace exclusion and burnout. Again, something which is worth discussing further and addressing, of course. Over 1 in 4 LGBTQ+ women in the UK have experienced discrimination or harassment at work in the past year, which is clearly unacceptable, but also astounding, really. So again, something to face into. Women of colour in the UK are more likely to face maternal discrimination, with Black and Asian mothers twice as likely to have negative experiences during maternity leave or return to work. And working class women, which we don't talk about class very much, I think it makes everybody feel a little bit uncomfortable, but working class women are less likely to access flexible working or progression opportunities after having children, especially in sectors with long hours or site-based roles, which again, in many of our worlds we face into. So when we say that women are underrepresented, particularly in the construction industry, which is the one we live in, we risk focusing most on privileged women. And when we apply an intersectional lens, we start to see who's left behind and why inclusion strategies must go deeper than just that. This is about inclusion for women overall. This is about understanding the difficulties that sit behind that. So hopefully that's framed why we're here and why we're talking about it and why it's important. We are always up for any form of challenge, debate or conversation around any of these subjects on this network. And that's one of the reasons why we've picked it for today's topic. So unless anybody's got any questions, then at this point, I'm going to hand over to Jen.
Thank you very much. Afternoon, everybody. So for those who don't know me, I am Jen Cassidy, CEO of Bristol Group, and as Max said, her co-chair on Elevate. And you know, again, as she said, absolutely passionate about this, and I will echo that. Anthea definitely does all the hard work here. We were just talking about that the other day, so very much appreciated as always, Anthea. I am so pleased to be able to introduce Sam as our speaker today. So I have had the pleasure of hearing her speak a couple of times, and you are in for a real treat. As Sam's also been a huge supporter of the CIC right from the very beginning, so brilliant to have her here today. So Sam is an award-winning writer and director who is autistic, ADHD and gay. And her work explores themes of neurodivergence, identity and queerness through bold storytelling in audio, drama and film. Sam wrote and directed the short film The Programme, which is a really powerful narrative questioning societal expectations around neurodivergence and the pursuit of heterotypical existence. The film was an official selection at the New York International Women's Film Festival and winner of Best First Time Filmmaker, London Women's Film Festival. We have any of the programme actually at Bristol as part of National Autism Awareness Day, and it's incredibly powerful. You know, the impact it had on people right across our organisation, the conversations that it started as a result. So I will absolutely make a plug for that and have a chat to Sam afterwards if you think that would be something that you want to have a look at within your own organisation as well. Sam's also written a series of acclaimed audio plays focusing on later life autism and ADHD diagnoses, as well as queer narratives. And her casts are pretty impressive, including Miriam Margoyles, Leslie Joseph, Jane Asher, Sharon Morgan, Lorraine McIntosh, Lucinda Carey, and Heather Peace. She was awarded the Anna Kennedy Autism Hero Award for the Arts in 2022 and hosts the podcast Daring to be Different, where she interviews neurodivergent and LGBTQIA+ changemakers. Sam also speaks publicly on leadership, change, audacity and disruption. London and runs workshops on neurodiversity, EDI, and challenging stereotypes. She's built a successful career in the corporate sector as a strategy, brand marketing, and customer director. So thank you, Sam, for being here. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Jen. I'm not sure I can follow that build up, actually. I shouldn't let you do that as well, but thank you. And it's absolutely a pleasure to be here. I say as I'm trying to share my screen, because I have been involved since the beginning with the CIC, and it's something that's really, really close to my heart. Is that working? Is that sharing my screen?
It is. Yeah, that's great. Full screen now. Great.
Fantastic. I cannot see any of you at all. So if you're putting hands up or anything, you have to yell at me because I can't see anything apart from my slides. So it's been an absolute privilege to be involved with the Construction Inclusion Coalition since the beginning, when I was working at Wolseley. And I've always stayed in touch, even though I'm currently working in the vet sector, which is slightly different. So thank you for having me. I really do appreciate being here. So the first thing that I'm going to say before I start talking today, and I've got 30 minutes and I can't see a clock. I'm going to do my best at 30 minutes, Anthea. The first thing I'm going to say is that I am audacious. And so I'm going to give you my audacity warning. You could watch these slides today and think to yourself, oh my gosh, Sam's really, really arrogant and really confident and really full of herself. Well, actually, I'm really not. I suffer from audacity, if you like. And as part of this declaration to you, I'm going to declare what my unfair advantages are as part of that. So one of the things that I have, and we all have unfair advantages, and it's worth having to think about what yours are, because these are the things that help us navigate our intersectionality and the challenges that we have at work. So my unfair advantages I wanted to declare to you today is that I'm incredibly good at detangling mess, whether that's in a workplace, whether it's a piece of data, whether it's a film script, whether it's a problem solving scenario, but I am very, very good at visually being able to unpick things incredibly fast and go, well, that just goes there, there, and there. So that's something I was born with, and one of my unfair advantages as part of my intersectionality. Another part is hyper focus. I mean, I really do have this to the max, and you'll see through the process of me telling you my story over the next few minutes how that hyper focus from my neurodivergence just kicks in. So I kind of wanted to declare these two up front ahead of my talk. And when I was thinking about intersectionality, preparing for this, I thought of lots of words about myself, and also how that changes over time. And I was kind of charting myself as a student, then single, then married, then divorced, then married, then divorced, and then single, and then married. And kind of having some fun thinking about what my intersectionality was and how that changed over time, being parent, and getting the diagnoses, etc. And then the joy of menopause and age coming into that as well. You mentioned class, being from working class background, and actually I just stuck some words, and that's not all of them. They were just some I could think of about myself and intersectionality. And again, going back to that timepiece that I mentioned, I did this a few years ago, and it's really worth doing if you get an hour and you're a bit of a nerd and you like data like I do. But I did this in Excel, and I sat myself down and I was thinking about my life and all the change that I'd been through and the journey that I was on. And I don't expect to see all the detail here. The point of this is, when you go through a piece of change, I drew it on the graph to say relocated, and then I got a bit bored, then I got a new job, and then I got a bit bored, then I relocated again, I got another job, did a career change, like I say, got married, moved house, then I get a bit bored again, got a new job, had a child, moved house, had children, this time twins, and then got married. And what's quite interesting is when you zoom out to the macro level, the amount of change that we all go through and what that does to us as a person. And as we start to peel back those layers of who we are, and we are on a journey of navigating and discovering who we are, that does change and that does build. And I think sometimes when we're in a time of stress, it's a good opportunity to step back at your own change curve and look back and think how far you've come and who you are and who you weren't 20 years ago, and sort of reflect on that. So it's quite important to me to share that idea with you as part of this intersectionality conversation about the layers that we're unpicking over time or as we discover ourselves. But I want to start my storytelling from a very particular year in 2018. And at that time, I was working for, my background is very heavily construction. I was working for Carillion, and you may remember it went into liquidation. when I was there. And that was a real shock. They obviously collapsed overnight, owing me money, and being the breadwinner at the time and having 3 children, that was a really, really sort of scary situation to be in. So that was my first one. These things tend to come in threes. The next one, a month later, was I got my diagnosis at the ripe old age of 43. You are autistic. So what do you do with that? What do you do with that later life plot twist where you look back over your whole life and go, oh, that now makes sense, and that makes sense, and that makes sense. And then you go through this whole process of grief and then rediscovering yourself. So that was the second thing that happened. And then the third one, just to ice the cake, as these things happened, is divorce. But I don't ever really like to let a good crisis go to waste. So with all this chaotic energy around me, I thought, okay, it's time to take stock and ask myself, who am I? I've just had some really earth-shattering things happen to me. Who am I now? Who is Sam? I've always known that I was gay ever since being very, very young. And I thought that being gay was my difference. But as I got older, I started to realize it's not just because I'm gay that I'm different. It was my journey on the diagnosis route for neurodiversity that really, really helped me to realize that my differences wasn't just because I was gay. I couldn't put everything down to that, or that I was from Yorkshire maybe. And that actually there were other aspects to myself. Now, one of the things that happened when I was at HomeServe, I was sent on this strategy leadership course at Windsor Leadership. If you ever fancy going on something completely different, it is not textbook led. They don't give you a folder with, petitions in it. It is a really different, immersive, creative experience. And I went on this Windsor Leadership course, and I wasn't very talkative. You can imagine I had all this going on. And I sat there very, very quietly. And I think one time I made a comment about how I didn't see that leadership meant you had to have a great big team underneath you, and actually it was okay to lead through influence. Anyway, because it was the only thing I'd said pretty much after a couple of days, one of the guys in the group really sort of seized on this and said to me, Sam, you sit there really arrogant, because I can come across as arrogant, not audacious, as I like to think. They said, you sit there, Sam, you've been very, very quiet, and you've just said this statement, how come you've got it all sewn up? How come you've got it all sorted? And I just said to him, I said, David, seriously, I am going through a divorce. I'm living on poached eggs. I'm living in one bedroom of my 4-bedroom house because I can't face the house without my kids. I am literally falling apart. I'm quiet because I don't know what to say. And he burst into tears. And then I burst into tears. And then everyone in the group burst into tears. And at that point, I learned to myself the power of being vulnerable and the power of sharing and talking about your experience, which is why I'm telling you I was living on poached eggs, rather randomly. But that experience of making yourself vulnerable and actually talking about who you are and sharing it and not putting the mask on and actually letting some of that intersectionality out was really, really powerful in that moment. And I thank him to this day for challenging me and having me say that. So as a result of that, I went back to work and I thought, okay, I've been gay forever, but I've never done anything about it. I've never done anything for my community. I've never done anything. So hyper-focus mode, Sam goes to the exec and we launched this whole, home. So it was absolutely fantastic. We rainbowed the brand. We did loads of events. We sponsored things. The CEO ran the London Marathon with the logo on his T-shirt. It was an absolute fantastic experience to get HomeServe behind it. And it was because of that vulnerability and because of that experience that I got involved. Well, you may imagine about this time, I'm kind of tired. So I think to myself, I should take a week off work, which was a bit of an unusual concept. So I Googled the week I had off work and thought to myself, what can I do? What can I do for this week? And this writing course came up out the blue. It was the right dates. I was like, it was in Dorset, Devon, Dorset, can't even remember, somewhere in the wilds. It looks like this. And I just booked it on a whim. Hadn't really written since I was at university and school. I thought I'm going to go on this writing course. So off I go for a week along to this writing course. And halfway through the first morning, the idea of this character just popped into my head. The idea of this character called Crocodile, don't ask me, random, but the character's name was Crocodile. And they were going through, they'd gone through a diagnosis of autism and ADHD. and they were having a really, really difficult time. You can see where I got my inspiration from. But I sat down and I wrote, it was a play, randomly. I wrote a play from scratch in the 5 days that I was there. And if I tell you that I really wasn't from a writing background, to the point of, as part of this building, there was a little library. And in one of the breaks, I went into the library and I looked for the play section. There was only about 10 plays there. And I pulled a few off and I'm like, how do you write a play? What does a play look like? Okay, 3 acts. Looks like set it up, screw it up, fix it. Brilliant. I know how to write a play. That was it. That was my research. And I wrote Crocodile, and it was such a cathartic experience for me to do that. When I came home, I self-published it so that it was real. It was really, really important to me to make it real. And I'll talk about this in a little while. But when you create something, making it real and making it a product, making it something you can hold and have your hands on is really, really important, especially when you're dealing with change and life changes, to have that. So brilliant. I've now written a play. I've got a nice hardback copy to give my mom. But the next problem happened was coronavirus. Now, we don't really want to talk about that, but it did happen to all of us. And as somebody who's now a playwright, clearly wanting to put a play on stage wasn't going to happen because we weren't allowed out. So I was at home, like the rest of you, on Zoom calls, making cookies, detangling Barbie's hair for my 3 kids, juggling all of this stuff. And within the midst of that, I wrote a sitcom, and it was a lesbian sitcom comedy idea. Basically, the idea was that it would be taking over Netflix for lesbians, and that they would create this whole empire of lesbian media. Now, I mentioned to you earlier about making it visual and making it real. I cannot impress upon you the importance of doing this. If any of you have got an idea for anything out there, if you want to make this real and you want to get it up off the ground, do something that brings it to life. So I got an online designer. I told him that I'd written this sitcom called Henpire. The main character was called Henrietta, and she's running this media empire. And I said, I want this logo doing. So the idea of she's Henrietta, it's a Henpire. I said, I want blood everywhere, but I want it to be nail varnish. So he came up with this fantastic logo. So I've now got a script for 6 episodes of this crazy, crazy comedy, lesbian comedy. And I recruited the help of a few friends from WhatsApp groups because everybody was bored and everybody was looking for something to do. And I was very, very lucky at teaming up with some other lesbians that were in the higher echelons of media and stuff. And we pulled this together. And I am not kidding you. I wrote this in my bedroom with a logo from a guy that was in South America that he did online for me. And on the back of that, we cast Heather Peace for one of the main roles, Alicia Eo, who's in Bad Girls, if you know it. We did a launch at the Langham in the tiny gap we had between lockdown days. We had the Langham Hotel. It ended up being part of a Channel 4 documentary. We had Bentley give us their rainbow Bentley for the day. Denise Welsh came, Sam Fox came. It was off the scale. If you think about, I'd literally just written this in my bedroom. And the reason I got it to happen was because I took not just the script, but the logo and the visual and the energy and created this to make it happen. So we have Henpire. So now I'm like, okay, we've got an audio play. We've got it on Spotify. It's got thousands of listeners. It's got a cult following. That's really fantastic. But what about Crocodile? You'll remember that I self-published it. Well, then I stuck it on Amazon, and I got the front image done again by the designer that I'd been working with in South America. And I explained what I thought I want the lead character to look like. She had a blowtorch because she makes bagels with a blowtorch. You'd have to listen it to make sense. So she's there with a blowtorch. And I'd met Heather now because I'd worked on Henpire with her. And I said, Heather, you're absolutely fantastic playing the lead character who's autistic ADHD. Crocodile is also. Would you mind taking the lead role for Crocodile? Would you listen to it? Would you have a look? So she said yes, and the rest is history. And she went in it. This is lockdown still. We're still in and out of lockdown. She went to a garage with a friend of hers. Now, it's always good to have a friend who's got a garage with a blowtorch. You never know when it might come in handy. Well, she rang her friend and recreated the photograph. If you see the original that I did, again, making it visual, make it real. She recreated that photograph. And I I enlisted the help of Sharice Blackman and Kieran Carr as well, and we recorded Crocodile, and it was recorded on handheld recording devices, which was all patched together. And if I listen to it now, I just think I can't believe we pulled that off. It was so sort of do it yourself and DIY, but the energy and the passion everybody had for telling the story about autism and later diagnosis in women. There was no content out there back then, if you can remember. This was not on the TV. They were not films. So that's Crocodile. That's on Spotify. You can have a listen. Heather Peace, she's in EastEnders at the moment. She's very, very funny. It's a very heartwarming story. And then I was in the bath and I had this idea for another character called Mole, who was Welsh this time. So I've done England and I wanted to do something more regional. And I had a character called Mole, set in Wales, and she's a face painter and she's absolutely terrible at it. And the journey with her, making friends with a local, very posh English woman, Corey Carey, and the idea came to life. Now, what the important thing about this story here, we're telling you about Mole, is while I was casting Mole, and this is advice to anyone who's casting a film or casting a play, do not randomly email out loads of famous people and offer them the part at the same time when you haven't had responses from their agents. Because within, I think it's about 8 or 12 minutes of me signing Sharon Morgan or Uchenda Carey to play the characters in Mole, I had a response from an agent. The actor had been out the country in Italy, and the response was, Miriam's in. Now, I have just signed the paperwork on Mole, the audio play, and Miriam Arglese wants to play the English character. And there was nothing I could do about it. So again, never waste a good crisis. So I said, oh, that's fantastic news. I said, but wouldn't it be better if Miriam was in my other play called, I'm making it up now, Kitty, and it's actually Scottish and her heritage is Scottish, and wouldn't it be amazing if she was in that one instead? So comes back, yep, Kitty sounds brilliant, Scottish is brilliant, send me the script. I am still about to record this audio play, which I haven't done yet, and I haven't written that. So what I do, and again, this is what I'm saying about making it visual, make it real, is I wrote the press release for Kitty, and I sent the press release for Kitty, which is about a person in there, she just turned 18 in real life, but a person in the 90s looking at a later life autism diagnosis with her 2 grandchildren who've got various life crises going on in a camper van across Scotland. It was great fun doing the camper van sound effects, etc. So I sent this over to her and she said yes. And so now I have to write another play incredibly quickly because she wanted to record it within 4 weeks. So the other stipulation was she wants to record it within 4 weeks and you're going to have to go to a house. We're still in COVID, very tail end now, but we're still in COVID. Miriam was self-isolating, so I had to go down there. We built an igloo, as you can see, out of duvets around her to create a sound box. I dialed in Lorraine McIntosh. I don't know if you know Lorraine, she's in Deacon Blue. We dialed her in, and Jenny Hulse from Glasgow. And I recorded it in person with Miriam. Again, it was terrifying, I have to tell you. It was terrifying, but an absolutely amazing experience. So that's how Kitty accidentally got written. There was no plan. It was a, whoops, better write a play for Miriam. So, great. And then the next bombshell. There's a thing. The next bombshell, I got a diagnosis of ADHD. I realized that my autism diagnosis hadn't quite filled out the whole picture for me. I still had traits that weren't quite explained, if you like, through my autism diagnosis. And I could go on about that as a whole separate thing. But when I had the ADHD diagnosis, very much again, like when I got my autism diagnosis, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And if you think you are autistic or you think you are ADHD, is a different experience to knowing you are. And especially in later life, and then the whole replay your life again. So dealing with that then, I'm now dealing with ADHD. So what did I do this time? I went for a swim. So I'm having a swim, trying to process this now. And this idea of a new play came into my head. while I was swimming, I'd been chatting with a actor online, who's a trans actor online, who was absolutely sick of getting cast in really, really stereotypical roles for being a trans person. And I said, right, well, that's just ridiculous. Let's write a comedy that's nothing to do with being trans, and you're a character in this play. And I wrote an entire play, and I had this idea while I was swimming about taking a piano and pushing it out of a window, and that's where the idea came from, how to drop a piano. And I went home, I wrote the play, and I sent it to Mabs, and Mabs, who's the lead character that I wrote it for. I contacted Jane Asher, who was his ambassador for the National Autistic Society and also a fabulous actor, and I said, would you fancy being in this new play? Contacted Leslie's agent as well and said, look, I've got this really funny comedy role for you, would you fancy it? So we recorded How to Drop a Piano and put that out there, which was absolutely fantastic. So that was my 4th audio play that was out. As mentioned earlier, I then won the Autism Hero Award for Annie Kennedy for the arts. And again, every time I make a play, I always put it on Amazon, so it physically exists. There's something for me really important about something tangible. We had mugs done and baseball caps because Hempire got quite a cult following. But it's really, really important to make things physical so that you've got a sense of that achievement. I was writing for Diva magazine as well. Again, a whole other story how I got involved in this, but most of it is Audacity going, can I just? My first gig that I got was with Janet Devlin, and I went, you can see that on the photograph there, and I went down to interview her, who's gigging in Birmingham. Did a fantastic piece of work with her. She was very, very honest and open. And then from that, I ended up writing other interviews. We also worked with the Lawn Tennis Association and did their first Pride event. So Friday, Pride Day is what we did. We did the centre court flip the coin thing, which is very nerve-wracking. And it was the first time that the LTA had done anything with Pride. And you'll know yourselves, you know, sports relationship is you know, is interesting around these themes. So that was an amazing experience. So you would think then everything's on a roll. Oh, by the way, I have a day job. This is all just like a side hustle because my day job's working in construction. But it's all kind of going where it's going. And then again, life does this to you. And unfortunately, my best friend, she took her own life, and we'd been friends since I was 4. We'd been to school together, we'd been to university together, we'd even worked together. And the first thing I always did when I wrote a play or anything was send it to Jenny and say, what do you think? And she'd give me some good, brutal Yorkshire feedback. And then, you know, I'd make the changes. And so she was such an important part of my life. And then she was gone, and I couldn't write anymore. And I went into space where I just couldn't write anymore. So I started a podcast series because I wanted to talk to people. I wanted to tell stories, but I just couldn't write anymore. So I just wanted to share other people's experiences of daring to be different and using that difference and that intersectionality. The podcast did pretty good. It got in the top 20% globally. And then one day I was watching TV, which I have ADHD. I'm not very good at watching TV, and I was very wiggly and, you know, not really paying attention until this character came on the screen. We were watching Granite Harbour, and Michelle Jerram came on the screen playing a character called Monty. And I literally said to my partner, I said, who's that? Who is that character? Because they were so different, the way that they were acting, and developing the character. I said, I need to talk to her. So I contacted her and got in touch with her, and I started chatting with her. I told her about the plays and everything that I'd done. And I said, look, I think you're fantastic. I love your character. I love what you're doing. I said, but I'm just not writing at the moment. I'm really, really stuck. And we conversed for a little while. And then she said to me, Sam, give yourself a nudge. So shortly after, I went on holiday. So don't feel sorry for me. I'm on holiday now. It's 40 degrees or something horrendously hot in Croatia. And I sat there and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to give myself a nudge. I'm going to write Michelle a film. I loved her character. I want to write her a film. Never written a film before. How hard can it be? So I got my iPad, which is not an easy thing to write a film on, just saying. So I got my iPad and I'm sat there like this on the Sun Lounger, and I wrote her a film, and I emailed it to her and I said, I've written you a film. She's like, what? I thought you were just going to do a little bit of writing. I said, no, I've written you a film. While I was on the beach, I cast the film. I got the soundtrack up and running and started to assemble a production team before I'd even got back. See the hyperfocus. And I had this idea of a person being interviewed by AI robots who was struggling with grief as an autistic person. Because one of the things that struck me when I was going through grief when Jenny died was, I'm autistic. I'm not meant to feel anything. I'm not meant to have feelings. And there's loads of stereotypes around that. And the opposite was true. I was having absolutely massive feelings and I didn't know what to do with them. So I wanted to subvert this. And the idea is that the character is actually being interviewed by the AI robots to teach the robots emotion from an autistic point of view, so that the algorithm understands what that looks like. So I had this idea of this isolated person sitting in the middle of a room on their own, being lonely and being interviewed and talk about grief. And this is my first early idea of what that would look like. And I found this space in the Millennium Point in Birmingham. It's a dance studio. And I looked around, as soon as I walked in, I took this photograph and I said, this is where I'm going to film it. So I took that photograph and I got the graphics added. You can see how this works now. I've got a script. I've now got this concept. I then develop that into the pitch pack. And once I've got the pitch pack, I get people behind me. And I could be talking about anything when I talk about this. I could be talking about a business case for a new HR platform. It doesn't matter what I'm talking about. The idea is the same. You have the guiding principle. You get your script, you get the photography or the image, and then the pitch is meat and potatoes after that. So this is the method that I go through. So I got the script, got this graphic now, and this is what the end result looked like. This is the front cover of the movie that we made. And you'll see that thinking comes through right from the early days. I got a really great team of casting crews together to work on this. I am winging it because I've written stuff, but I've never written a film before. I've never directed a film before. I've never even been on a film set before. So it was really, really testament to the cinematography and the sound director around me that helped me pull this off. This is some of the stills from the filming. This is Michelle in the room on the left, being interviewed by the robot. The opening scenes, she walks through some fantastic sort of iconic areas in Birmingham as the credits are rolling. This is when she arrives at reception. I've just got some photographs. I just wanted to get across to you the film set that ended up being created to make this film. I was not a filmmaker. I'm a later life filmmaker, a later life writer. And some of why I'm sharing this with you is to say, don't be sat there today thinking, I wished I'd, or why didn't I? I would genuinely say to you, whatever it is you've got in your head, have a go, get some people around you and follow that dream. This is the film premiere that we held in Digbirth. This is just a few photographs of the cast and crew, just to give you an idea. And it was literally just me sat on the beach writing this. We won several awards for the film, as you can see with these laurels. And then what happened was my girlfriend went out to a Christmas party. And so I'm left at home on my own. She's gone out for the night. I don't know what am I going to do. So you know what's coming. I wrote a film. Now, I am now going through menopause, and that's been a fun experience. And I wanted to talk about menopause and identity and what that does to you when you hit sort of late 40s, like I am, into 50s. And the horror in finding yourself. And the idea of this film is that she's trapped in this house that's, she feels like she's trapped in a horror film. And then she meets up with her friend and they have a graveyard, of course, and they have conversations about what that feels like. And it's not the kind of hot flush tropes. It's the hard hitting. It's about identity. She's lost a job. What does that mean when you're 50 plus, going through menopause and really evaluating that identity? So it's not for the faint-hearted. So this is my AI mock-up. I have a lot of conversations about AI. I have a love-hate relationship with AI. And this is an AI mock-up that I had done for the film The Pause. And then I cast Susie Bloom, who I'd worked with before, on How to Drop a Piano. She's been in a few films, and you may recognize her. She just finished playing Sybil Fawlty at the West End. This is Susie. We recreated the photograph with a fantastic photographer that I know. and had the movie front cover made up, you really are getting the theme of my rhythm now. And we shot the film, wrote the film, cast the film, and we shot the film back in April. This was an absolute gear change from my last film that was just a few locations. Still a short film, but we really upped the ante in what we had to achieve. We had to build a graveyard, if nothing else, because you can't film in graveyards. So when I sat there on the sofa that night writing away, I didn't realize we were gonna have to build a graveyard. Got a few more photographs to show you. Obviously there's a creepy cellar. It's a comedy film, a comedy horror, because horror films are the only films getting made at the moment. So I made it on purpose as a horror film, but like I say, it is a comedy. It was very messy when we had to do the classic, oh my gosh, my teeth are falling in the sink scene. We got very covered in blood that didn't wash off for days. We've got a brilliant camera crew that had to pull off all kinds of weird and wonderful shots, Stanley Kubrick style. And this is just showing you some of the shots of us filming on the day back in April. This is the graveyard that we built, and some of the shots from inside the pub. And this is genuinely the graveyard. It was such an experience to do this. I know I'm probably running out of time. I'm just going to say so that's my project that's at the moment. It's currently in post-production. It's coming up to edit. I'm hoping it's going to be available for Halloween. That would make really good sense, wouldn't it, if we could get it ready for Halloween. We're just sorting the soundtrack out. If any of you would like to get involved in helping me share this film about menopause and identity, like I say, it's the hard-hitting end about, you know, the kind of like, who am I? Then that would love to come back and talk to you, or, you know, just sort of follow me on socials. But this is a really important conversation around menopause. And just also that I just came back from holiday, for a week in holiday, and I may have written another film. This is a completely different kind of film. Again, it's talking about AI and redundancy. This is really hot off the press. Nobody's seen this yet. But what I want to do with this film is actually make it as an art installation in an art gallery, so that you can actually walk around and experience it, and it not just be a film, but actually have conversations around humanity and identity and AI, and what does that mean for us and all of our fractured selves. So it has been a whistle-stop tour of my intersectionality, and hopefully I have showed how all these different facets of myself have come together and how I've navigated adversity during that, but always trying really just to focus on, you know, who am I and where I'm going, and then trying to make things that are going to make a social impact, and having that honesty and audacity to share personal experiences, because I think that's what makes a big difference to people. I wanted to finish on a happier, higher note, because you've obviously been through my divorce and my diagnosis, and unfortunately me losing my best friend. And I just wanted to say, dear reader, life did get better, because I actually got married in May, and there is my wife that was my girlfriend at Christmas when I wrote the film. So yes, we are now married on a beach. Where else? We just quietly sneaked off and had a Cornish pasty on the beach. Got married back in May. So it did end well. So there you go. I think I did that in half an hour. Thank you.
You did. Thank you, Sam. You did it perfect timing. And congratulations. I didn't know you got married. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. You couldn't see our expressions either, because there was actually a lot of like.
And we have a couple of questions coming in. I think so. Charlotte Lloyd, let's go with Charlotte first. So when I'm left unsupervised without my husband, he'll come back to something having me added to the interior of the house, which is my films. And amazing use of your audacity, Sam. What are your tips for avoiding burnout from all the ideas, emotion, and energy that come with AUDHD?
That's a really good point, because I do get burnt out, but I think for me, always having a project actually stops burnout in a strange way. I tend to burn out when I don't have a project. So when I finish the program, so between the program and me writing the pause, I didn't know what to do with myself. So weirdly, if I stay up, you know, I keep up, and I think I get myself in trouble if I don't have a project. So weirdly, which is probably the opposite, isn't it? Which is have a rest and have a bath and all these good things. probably a good idea to do that. But for me, it's about actually always having a project, even if it's a lower burn, but keep the brain busy for me anyway.
Thank you. And then Nikki Harvey, thank you for sharing. Nikki's seen the programme at Bristol and loved it, and is looking forward to seeing the pause. And she'd like to ask you about self-belief. Where do you get yours from, and how do you maintain it to have the confidence to achieve so many incredible things?
Thank you. I don't actually know it's self-belief. I think it's belief in the project. I think that's what I do, because I genuinely don't think I'm brilliant or anything, and I know that's what I sort of started to say that just in case, but I think I believe in the project. So the pause project is so important to me, because when I was starting to make it last year, earlier in the year, so many women my age came up to me and shared stories that were really, you know, how they'd lost confidence and they were having a crisis about who they were. And so how I stayed focused and how I keep the momentum is because I think putting this film out there, I know is going to make a difference, because I know women are going to watch it and go, that's me, that is me. And that's why I want to do it. It's not about me. It's not about me. It's about the film and the story and the message and being heard and seen. I think representation, having got diagnosed as autistic ADHD when there was nothing on the TV. I mean, now you won't believe it, but there was nothing when I was diagnosed in 2018. It really matters. Representation matters. So I do it so that we see ourselves represented.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to the next subject? Feel free to put a hand up if you don't want to type it in. Okay. Thank you, Sam. Love listening to you as ever.
Thank you.
So I think we'll probably, oh, sorry, did we have a hand put up or swiftly taken down again? Good. Okay, we'll carry on.
Yeah.
Anthea, I think we're going to
Yes.
share the slide deck again.
Yes,
aren't we?
I will go back to sharing the slides. Let me
Perfect.
just,
Sam, thank you. I sat there smiling, laughing. I think I had a little tear at one point.
Yeah.
I was like, don't know where to go next. Absolutely amazing to listen to you. Thank you so much. So I don't know really how you follow that, and certainly I don't know how you keep that energy level up that high, but we're going to try. So look, we wanted to move into a bit of a workshop now, so that we can talk amongst ourselves about the subject, understanding and applying intersectionality in our lives and work. So first and foremost, just have a little thought, maybe drop some comments in the chat box for me, and just answer this question. What aspects of your identity do you feel most aware of day to day? And just maybe for a few minutes whilst you're thinking about that, and as I say, I'd encourage you, if you don't mind, just to drop your answers into the chat box. I guess I'll answer the question, which is, it was always gender. In the industry I work in, it was always gender. Do you know what? I would probably be honest enough to say that now it's my age. And I get more and more aware of that. And I was always somebody that age never mattered, and it was just another birthday. And as long as I'm still alive for the next one, I'm doing all right, aren't I? That's okay. But all of a sudden, and as I say, I'll share whilst you're putting something in chat box and thinking. My dad died really in his 50s, quite young. And all of a sudden, this year in July, I hit the birthday that he was when he very first got ill. And all of a sudden, I thought, oh my goodness. I'm not as old as he was when he passed away, but all of a sudden I'm the age he was when he first got ill. And age all of a sudden became something I was aware of every day. And then you think about it at work. Well, you never thought about it at work before. It's just a number. It doesn't matter. But all of a sudden I'm aware that maybe I'm not as young as I used to be. And what if I want to do this next? And is that going to stop me, or am I just stopping myself? So there you go. That's me. That's probably the aspect of my identity I feel currently most aware of day to day. And I'm sure it changes for all of us at all different times of our lives. We've had a few in the chat box, which is great to see. So let me have a look at some of those. So Lina, I hope I've said that right, and I apologise profusely if I've said your name incorrectly. Lina, I knew I was going to say that wrong. Lina, thank you. So Lina agrees with age for so many reasons: brain fog, sight issues, etc. And I'm sure there's many of us that that can totally understand that. Nikki says being a mother, being well over 40, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it is so much of our identity and so much of our life. And you know, we had a section with Elevate, didn't we, about work-life balance, and being a mother over 40 brings I'm sure different challenges. Perimenopausal, age, part-time, all of the above, I'm sure, for many. Jenny says agree to age with brain fog, forgetting things. Being a parent, neurodiversity and grieving, that's and I'm going to say your name incorrectly as well. Grania?
Grania, everyone does.
Sorry. I remember you from previous sessions as well. So, but that parent, being a parent, being neurodiversity and grieving, all definitely obviously relevant. Jen being a 40-something single woman with no kids, that's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a bit like, you know, the old chat about football around the coffee machine. The chat about kids is also really relevant, where you don't quite maybe feel like you're part of that conversation. Laura says gender and age for her, more due to being younger, actually. People sometimes not taking me seriously, and that funnily enough, Laura, I totally resonate with, but at a very different end of my career, there were times when I felt exactly that. Being Black, not being a mother or married, interesting. So all of those things that we just talked about through the you know, the coffee or the water cooler chat, as they call it, and maybe not feeling big part of those things. Mainly gender for Emily, which is a big thing for all of us on the call, I'm sure. And Caroline says trying to find the balance between being a mum and my career, switching between the two. Absolutely, I'm sure resonates. Michelle says gender and change of job. Those Sam talked about all those changes in life, didn't she? Which is where we have those peaks and troughs of feeling about all different things. And Eve says age, but on the flip side, to most of the above, mostly being one of the youngest in any situation or room I enter, and maybe that imposter syndrome that comes with it, which again, another interesting topic, which I'm sure we'll cover on one of these sessions. Menopause, recent diagnosis of AS and a parent. Lots going on all at one time, I'm sure becomes even more confusing. Mandy says being vegan, that's interesting. I'm a vegetarian, Mandy, but I'm always quite glad I'm not a vegan, because having to justify even more food habits is hard work. So I totally get that, actually. And Charlotte, aging and ADHD, a year since diagnosis. Charlotte, thank you for sharing. That's really appreciated. Carolina says non-native English speaker and no kids. Again, interesting, isn't it? The different things that really you're so aware of in everyday life. And Tina says age and coming from a working class background as a single parent and changing career paths at 50. All of those things you're probably so aware of, and yet I'm sure other people in life would be surprised that any of us are so aware of all of these aspects of our personality. So thank you for sharing. Really, really interesting, and we're going to just move on a little bit then, having sorry, Joe in the end there saying being a single working mother with teenage daughters with their own challenges. Yeah, no, I hear you. As a mum of two and a stepmom of two, we've got all sorts of ages and challenges going on in this house constantly, so I understand that. Okay, so here's something we'd just like you to spend a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes, Anthea, if that's
even
about
less, I think. Just 5. Yeah.
Just 5 minutes. Just if you've got a pen and paper in front of you, and I'm a note taker, so I'm forever scribbling, which is what you've probably seen me doing today. What we'd like you to do is create your own identity web. So hopefully you can see the slide, which will probably just explain it better than I'm about to. But if you write your name in the center of a page, and then radiating out from you, draw your key identity markers, examples on the page, but gender, race, religion, age, neurodiversity, socioeconomic status, sexuality, etc. And then if you want to either color code or put a ring around a symbol for areas of either marginalization versus privilege. So hopefully that's understood. Give it a go. Let's come back together in about 5 minutes and just maybe have some reflections, again using the chat box, on what we felt about that. So over to you. 5 minutes in your own space, just having a think about you. Okay, so hopefully I can't see everybody, but hopefully you can all hear and add in. So just in terms of that exercise, was there anything particular which surprised you when you were going through your key identity markers that maybe made you think a little bit? And also, in addition to that, was there anything that you particularly found that stood out as being either challenging or affirming about mapping your identity? By all means, either stick up a hand or drop a message in the chat box, just to let's talk about it a little bit more.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was trying to put a hand up. I clapped instead.
We'll clap you, Jen. That's all right.
I think, so I thought I was just a white female, and actually there are 10 different things I've written down, which I thought was really, really interesting. And actually, of the 10, I would say 5 are probably areas of privilege. 5 are maybe things that make life sometimes just a bit tougher.
Yeah,
I think was my observation.
Yeah, more than you think about when you just think about you and what you know, either the challenges or the privileges that you bring with you. So interesting. Not as many that stuck out as thought. So there's an opposite view there, as maybe not as many things. Laura said found it harder to put together than she thought at first, but again, a lot of privilege, which is interesting. And Fiona said an equal number of privilege and of challenging things. I think I had actually a similar number, just kind of I circled my, if you like, areas of privilege, and I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 maybe, and 1, 2, 3, 4 areas the opposite way. So that's Mandy says equal number for her as well. So interesting. Karis said she was also surprised by how much privilege there was. It's amazing, isn't it, that stuck out for quite a few of us. Millie said a personal observation is about class. I always have to justify my middle class status with working class background. I've even written it on the paper. And do you know what, Millie? So have I. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? It's you kind of justify yourself in different ways. Anybody else got anything that maybe surprised them a little bit when they mapped their identity? Maria says, I contradicted myself in a way by being working class originally, then had to look around and say I'm not in that camp now. And to Sam's point earlier, you just change and move and grow and develop and go backwards and forwards throughout your whole journey, don't you? So I'm sure that if we all did this, I don't know, last week, last year, in a year's time, we would all have different answers again in some areas, not all. Mandy says having no biological children surprised her. So Mandy, in terms of that being an area of your identity that you identified, I think that is interesting. And Carolina said some being both, e.g. no kids felt that there was plenty of privileges, but also often being judged. It's not clean cut, is it? It's neither one thing or the other all the time, and in different circumstances. I think sometimes things are an area of privilege and also therefore an area of non-privilege in different situations. So yeah, really interesting thought, Carolina, thank you. Okay, so I don't think there's any more comments. Sorry, Jo said it made her think about what Sam had put. Northern was one of them. I'm from the North and agree. Anyone else feel their hometown can mean people judge? It's really funny, isn't it? It's such a personal thing. Sometimes I think you're not allowed to have a normal Southern accent anymore. It's much cooler to be from somewhere else. But other people will feel. Fiona said, yep, she's a Brummie and she feels that too. So probably all feel something slightly different. Nikki says, yep, postcode snobbery alive and well in the Black Country. A Derbyshire accent but adopted Brummie. And Maria's from Liverpool, lives in Northamptonshire. So yeah, I have a terrible habit of mimicking everybody's accents, and I don't do it to be rude. It's a natural thing I do, and then everybody thinks I'm actually just being judgmental or horrible about them, and I'm not. I just copy people and I don't even know why I do it. But there you are. So thank you for that, everybody. So look, hopefully just 5 minutes reflection on ourselves and our own identities and how we feel about those is a useful start to move us into the next section, for which I'll hand over, Jen, to you, if that's okay.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go off into breakout groups now, and just try and kind of talk through some different scenarios and kind of continue to explore privilege, and intersectionality, and what we can all do to better understand and support each other. So we're going to look at how multiple identities, gender, race, neurodivergence, disability, sexuality, class background interact and shape women's experiences in our industry and in the workplace. So we're going to go off into small groups. We'll each get a short scenario from a real world setting in construction. And what we're asking everyone to do is really focus not just what's happening on the surface, but what are those underlying identity dynamics, and what can we learn from that? What challenges are each of these individuals facing? And what could be done differently? And I think that's both at an organisation level, but actually, you know, we talk about this, you know, the new campaign for Construction Inclusion Coalition is Inclusion Starts With Us. So I think it's really on a personal level. If you were to encounter somebody facing some of these challenges, what can you as an individual do, as well as what should we be doing better as organisations and collectively as an industry as well? So I shall hand over to Anthea to explain how the whole breakout room thing works. So we were group one, and our scenario was about Jazz, who joined the factory team as a graduate engineer, a British Pakistani woman, and basically sort of wasn't being involved. So Charlotte is going to share for us.
Hello,
If she's
can you hear me?
Yes, we
I'll
can.
put my camera on whilst I'm talking, not to scare you all. Yeah, so we spoke about this one. I think the first thing, particularly for me, was I actually was a person that assumed, and because it said graduate engineer, I automatically assumed it was a young woman, which actually is not the case. Like, obviously anybody can be a graduate at any age. So I think that was the first assumption. I think it maybe hit home with us a little bit that naturally people do assume, but it's, I think, acknowledging that and correcting yourself not to, I guess, just assume and think that that is the standard. So I think as soon as it was mentioned, it was okay, we've acknowledged that it could be a young person, but equally it could be an older person. So that was quite interesting, because I wouldn't associate myself with someone that judges or necessarily stereotypes. But I think, yeah, you actually do more than you probably think, which isn't a bad thing. Obviously, it is completely natural. But like I say, I think it's taking accountability and then understanding, well, hang on a minute, it's not one size fits all, which I think is kind of where we got into then with the next bits in terms of like what's happening here. It's almost like there's a culture that's been created where she's different to the norm, whether that's to do with processes, whether that's to do with poor inductions, poor, I guess, diversity within the team, leadership team, and within the general team. As kind of, how are we acknowledging this, and how are we then, I guess, improving it, or are we pulling people up on it? So if I was a Jazz, I would be scared to say something, but I would then like to think that somebody else, if they're seeing it, would kind of work with me to make the improvements. Because if you already feel like an outsider, I think it's almost hard to, I guess, go against the grain even more to raise the issue. So yeah.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you.
So group two and scenario two. Oh, you're on mute, Anthea.
I was just going to say there was another group who had scenario one. I don't know whether they wanted. I don't know whether they want to add anything. Yeah.
Go for it.
Is there anyone else? Other group? It would have been group 5, I think. It's fine if you don't want to add anything, but no. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to scenario 2. Yeah.
So scenario 2, out of the road. So Sophie is a lesbian working in sales. She often avoids mentioning her partner in conversation. Once a customer made a joke about needing more real women in sales that wasn't addressed. So who is going to talk to us about this one?
I'm happy to. Yeah, so our group went through this scenario. We picked up a couple of things. Obviously, it doesn't have a huge amount of detail, so we were hypothesizing and sort of talking about our own experiences as well, which was great. But one of the biggest things that we picked up was the fact that it's a customer. So you've immediately got a bit of a dynamic issue there, and we said collectively we would find that really difficult to call that out in that situation. I think ultimately, depending on the kind of relationship you already had with that individual, potentially you could start the discussion of, well, what do you mean by real woman? Sort of starting that up. But then we said potentially there might be issues with, if you did want to make a complaint, you've then effectively sort of fanned the fire a little bit. So, we were talking about that issue. But the one thing we did assume was that the customer was a male. Again, anybody could sort of make that joke, particularly in this particular lens around Sophie's sexuality. So that was one of the things we also sort of, I guess, like I said, assumed. We talked about it also as well about how Sophie's workplace could have supported her. Again, Sophie feeling comfortable going back and having that discussion with either a manager or another sort of senior leader within the business to say, look, this is what's happened, potentially additional allies. But it was quite a difficult one, like I said, from a dynamic perspective. And ultimately, there's a lot of internalization also there because she's avoiding talking about it, and clearly, she's in a position where people are making jokes about that as well. So it was quite a tricky one to sort of work through, but I think we picked out quite a lot of stuff, and like I said, we went through our own experiences as well, which was great.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura.
And Jen, our group also looked at this scenario, and I think we'd echo a lot of what Laura said, actually, because we got into a right old chat about Sophie and her choices, and it's absolutely her choice if she wishes to or doesn't wish to talk about her partner or any aspect of her life, really. But we also talked about what might make her feel more comfortable in bringing herself to work and having that openness, and whether how can companies therefore support in terms of better education, more neutral language, partner, not how's your husband or wife, and just making assumptions around language just generally, being much more aware about the language that you use. And going back to the real woman thing, I think we had quite a conversation about probably doesn't matter whether Sophie is a lesbian or isn't a lesbian. What on earth is a real woman? I mean, am I not a real woman because I'm not a size 6, or does this person think real women should always be a size 20, or do they think they should be 50, or do they think they should be 18? It's such a ridiculous term.
Yeah.
Partly we talked about then the language of tackling that. Don't necessarily have to do it with aggression. Sometimes you can just do it. And Millie made the point of talking with curiosity, so that's interesting you say that. What's a real woman to you then? What does that even mean? And all of a sudden they probably sit there and think, okay, that was a stupid comment. I might not make that one again. So it's just kind of having that, being an ally, but not necessarily being an ally in a don't you ever speak to my friend like that again way, but more in a challenging back. What did you mean by that? Why would you talk like that? Let's have that conversation. So
yeah, brilliant.
I love that.
Okay, group 3, scenario 3. So the neurodiverse planner, Leah, who has ADHD, works in planning and scheduling. She thrives in strategy work but struggles with rigid meeting formats and fast verbal processing in Teams calls. Her strengths are overlooked in favour of more vocal team members. Who would like to share their thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'll talk for our group. So yeah, we had quite a good discussion on this, but we really thought about different adjustments and communication styles, and looking at, is there a balance, and can the meetings be run in different ways? Do the meetings always have to be really rigid? Can they work in a slightly different way? Can someone different chair the meeting each time so everyone has a chance to speak? Definitely. And then supporting different people's awarenesses and looking at how they talk within that meeting. Having visual parts within the meeting. Does everything have to be written down all of the time? sending out the agenda ahead of time? Would it help Leah to have the agenda ahead of time rather than just walking into the meeting and just having things there? And then also, what type of neurodivergent is she? We've got ADHD, but is there anything else? Thinking about maybe if someone's anxious or things like that, is there other ways that there's support that she needed? And also, has she said that she needs that support? Because there could be times where if you're in a management position, you could feel that, am I overstepping? Am I mollycoddling them by thinking that they need this when they haven't actually said that they need support? Giving her the environment that she feels that she can be open and honest and say, look, I need this help or I don't need this help. And then you can make adjustments around that. And then recognition as well, making sure that we recognise her good work and that it isn't just the vocal team members that get to have their voice heard. I think that was more or less what we had.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And last up, we have scenario 4, the branch supervisor mum. So Aisha, a black woman and branch supervisor, returns from maternity leave and is assigned fewer leadership tasks. When she raises concerns, she's told she's being too emotional and should focus on her work-life balance. This one made me really cross. They all made me really cross, actually. The emotional thing triggered me. Who would like to talk to us about number 4?
It's me, Catherine, here. I was going to take this one for group 4. I think for us, well, first of all, we were quite passionate about this because I think the majority of us in this group had experienced something along these lines of what we're talking about here. And if I was to summarise, I think there is a thread of stereotyping through this scenario that many of us are quite familiar with. And actually, it comes down to almost this assumption that you don't want the job as much. I mean, personally, from my experience, I was glad to go back to work. That doesn't mean I don't love my children, but I also need my time away and feel fulfilled out of that. And actually, when you layer the race, the gender, and the motherhood, it was all seen as such a negative traits to have in a workplace. We talked here about, being too emotional. You don't get, I've never heard a man being criticised for being too emotional. I hear it many times with women. I reflected on a personal experience of mine is when you stay late in the office, why you're still here, remember you've got kids at home. Oh yeah, I mean that is why I'm here at 6:30, because actually might not want to do bath time and all of that, but there was just all this that as women were the primary caregivers, and actually if you weren't there, you weren't fulfilling what is almost seen as a more important role. And when we talked about the systematic assumptions, that it's almost assuming she hasn't got her work balance right. It's making a decision for her. And then actually, where does that come from? And I think it comes back from perhaps a traditional, traditional organisation of how the senior management sits. Now, obviously, that's not so much the case there, but we looked about that. We talked a lot about the policy changes or the allyship, and actually we talked around having really frank discussions with people coming back to work after becoming parents in this way, and that some people will want to continue with a career and we should absolutely support them, but others might want to put development on pause. That's not to say they don't want to be there, but actually they might be happy to stay to tread water. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but I'll use it before then, perhaps moving. So for us, it was about having those conversations and perhaps having those return to work policies that aren't just for those first few weeks, but actually for those 12 months whilst you go through an awful lot of adjustments as a family unit, I'll say, not just as a mother, but as a family. So yeah. Have I done that justice, guys? I know I said I'd do it. Yes, lovely. Right, there we go.
Very well done.
Lots
Brilliant.
of passion there.
Yeah. I think some really interesting stuff coming out there, and I think that point, around challenging ourselves and our own assumptions, kind of pushing back against that systemic stereotyping, the allyship that came through, really important, but equally actually the policy and process being so important as well. And I think it's about it being driven at every level of the organisation, isn't it? So thank you very much for that. I've really enjoyed it.
Can I just add something on this branch supervisor mum? Something I've had an aha moment. I saw something on LinkedIn this week around, you know, how we and me as someone who has worked part-time, who has had children, how I might make assumptions about other women who are coming back to work after having a baby, thinking that they may want to take the foot off the gas, may have to, you know, struggling balancing things. And I've had a big aha moment as myself around how I must not make those assumptions that you think you're being caring and you're being a good boss, but actually you're not. You're actually, as a female, I'm reinforcing those negative stereotypes. So going back to the point that Catherine made, it's about just having those really frank conversations and not putting your own feelings and what you want on top of someone else. I just think as women, we just need to be really, really careful of that. Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
I think it's back to Max.
Well, thank you, everybody. Look, fascinating conversation, and really appreciate, as always, all your inputs and your thoughts and your comments. I think just a bit of reflection, really, on what we've talked about, what we've read, what we've heard, what we've heard from Sam, and what we might be able to do to support people with intersecting identities in our network or workplace. So probably, again, a bit of a pop your ideas in the chat box if you've got them, but think about yourself as an individual around, you know, as Anthea just described, she just probably had that oh my goodness moment this week on an assumption that she might have made in the past. And so as an individual, what can we do to better support in terms of ourselves, our language, our assumptions, how we listen or how we're listened to? And then think about teams, whether we're inclusive in the meetings that we have and the way they're set up, our policies, our feedback, etc., etc. And then the overall organisation. You know, what can the overall organisation do to better support people with intersecting identities? Is that about representation? Is it about policies? Is it about ERG structure, etc., etc.? So maybe you could just have a little think about that, pop some ideas in the chat box, and we'll just have a couple of minutes just looking back on some of that. I've just realised, Anthea, that I myself got chucked out after the group and I rejoined, so I don't know whether I'll see the same in-call messages. I think I will.
Yeah, nothing's in there yet. Nothing's in there yet. So, yeah, but you got back in. Isn't it weird? Some people can get in and some people can't. I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
When I say it chucked me out, it was absolute user error, by the way. It was.
You left. Right, so stuff coming through.
My hand on the button too long, so it went from rejoin the group to no, I'm out of the meeting that they were. Anyway, so Jen, challenging her own assumptions is a big takeout. Stop thinking that Jen saying stop thinking what I know people want and need, and actually ask them what they need. And I think that's very similar to reflection I've had about myself, really. Andy says being much more open-minded and making no assumptions about others, and I think that's a very similar theme. I think a few of us have thought that through this session. You have to hold yourself to task, don't you, a little bit, and actually reevaluate whether you're the person that you want to be bringing to this support network as well. Maria said it is self-awareness, key to all that you do, being mindful that as part of human nature, we're all judgmental and to challenge ourselves regularly. Absolutely, common theme again. Be curious and ask, absolutely. And again, that came out of our breakout group, which was, you know, be curious and ask questions, not just of the person that you may be trying to support, but also other people that are challenging to them. Millie said neutral language, which is not binary, lead with curiosity and not judgment. Absolutely. And Tina said self-awareness and curious. A few more, not to assume based on our own experiences. That's a big one, isn't it? And it's hard, but you absolutely have to keep challenging yourself in that way. And education around privilege and intersecting identities, how it affects us and how you can use it for allyship. Absolutely, here. And Mara says confront biases, and I think that's absolutely right in other people, but also maybe ourselves a little bit when you don't even realise that or think of yourself in that way. Monitor my own privilege, actively look for other people struggling. Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think sometimes we use busy as an excuse for too much, but we'll walk along in our own worlds doing our own thing and sometimes actually don't open our eyes to the fact that other people are struggling and how can we better support. And Carolina said, again, self-awareness and being open-minded. What's best for me might not be best for others. Absolutely. And Charlotte says, acknowledging that every individual has differences with or without a label. It's not one size fits all. Take the time to understand individuals and don't judge. No two people are the same. Here, absolutely. And again, we really talked quite a lot about that in our group, which was, understanding the person and spending time understanding the human being rather than the label they bring to work because of any particular part of their identity is really important. So some fabulous comments there. I think maybe there's a lot. I think everybody has looked at that, looking at the comments on the screen as being a real reflection of individual, to a certain extent, team, but it's interesting that we haven't generally gone to the organizational level. We've all thought about it as us as individuals, and maybe that's where it always should start, because unless we do that as individuals, then the collective isn't going to, is it? But from an organizational perspective, I think education for me is really, really key throughout the organization. And being prepared to have those conversations and being prepared to admit as an organisation that you might need to reach out to different identities to understand better what support is required. Because I think organisations get into a rut of assuming that they should know everything and we're going to set a policy based on that assumption, and maybe that's not always the case. And Mar said education and policy change, absolutely, because after the education you have to do something about it, right? And that, I think that's so important as well. Okay, any last comments on collective reflection, and then we're probably just going to ask you to take one thing away with you, I think. Catherine?
You're on mute.
Can't hear you. That's weird. We could hear you before.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't hear you, Catherine. Sorry, I don't know what's gone wrong there. Something in the chat, Catherine, if you can, we can read it.
Yes.
Sorry, we just couldn't hear you at all. Okay, so thank you. We'll see if we can get anything through from Catherine. But other than that, let's move on then to maybe that just one last thing.
Yeah.
So I think what would really like us all to take away from here is maybe one action. So to have a think about, and by all means share in the chat box, although I appreciate we are running out of time. But if we don't share in the chat box or don't have time to, then please maybe just take this away and have a think about this, which is one thing I can do to better support inclusion in my team or workplaces, ... And that is the one ask that we would have of you, is to go away and think about that. As I say, if you've got time whilst we're closing, just to put a couple of comments in the chat box, then please do. But outside of that, maybe that's our takeaway from today. One thing I can do to better support inclusion in my team or workplaces, and what's our promise to ourselves. Catherine said she found the bit about sharing our own vulnerabilities part very powerful. Thank you. So thanks for that, Catherine. Okay. So in order to close then, I would say thank you very much for joining us today. Hopefully you found it interesting. I could have listened to Sam probably for another couple of hours longer, but really appreciate everybody coming onto the meeting or onto the call and really sharing and being prepared to have a chat through some of these really interesting and really important topics. So that's appreciated. We are, Anthea, do you want to do a grand reveal at this point?
Yeah.
We are hoping that
We
next
are,
time
yeah.
we may get together.
So we're planning to meet face to face next time. So next we're due to meet on the 19th of November, and Ibstock are happy to host us in their iStudio, which is in central London. It's a really nice location. So if you are free on the 19th of November, please block your diary out. There's also the Construction Inclusion Coalition that afternoon is going to be actually doing a session at the Elemental London show. So we're hoping some people might come with us and actually be part of the audience at the Elemental London as well, which is over at Excel. So put date for your diary. The topic I've got penciled in is imposter syndrome, but I'm happy to hear other topics. And if anyone in the group would like to help me design that session or get involved at all, please, I'd love to hear from you. And if anyone's got any other ideas, please, I'd love to hear from you as well. But otherwise, we'll write to you shortly about the plans for the 19th of November.
Brilliant. So once again, thank you all very much for joining and for contributing, and really hope that we see each other in person on the 19th of November.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.